Okay, so Josh Brenner, CEO of Hired, thank you for coming on the show. Happy at work. And basically, it's all about empowering workers, bringing positivity into the workforce, making people happier at work, making a better situation, diversity, inclusion, all these themes. And what better guest is a guy who's steeped into AI in terms of diversity, hiring, and well, instead of me saying, Josh, you can introduce yourself, what you do, and what goes on at Hired.
Awesome. Well, thank you first so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on the podcast with such an esteemed group here. Hired is a AI-driven hiring marketplace. So what we do is we help companies build their teams by providing them with access to a pool of pre-vetted candidates. And essentially, we use as much data as we can capture from both sides of the market to make the best match and ultimately drive to a placement or a hire. We focus specifically on tech and sales hiring. And we operate primarily in the US, Canada, and the UK. But as we look into next year and we look back, past on this past year, things are changing very, very rapidly, as you know, in the hiring world. Companies have the ability to hire people now in a lot easier of a way globally, and so that as we look into next year, that's something that we're exploring very heavily is how do we help our clients also sort of find the best people they can find really around the world.
Josh, I'll start us off. I teach a strategic sales management class at Harvard Professional Development. And what a lot of the managers have always tried to do, and we do try to help them with research-based data, is how do you predict that a salesperson is going to be good at what they do? And I'm curious, we all know that to feed AI, you need to feed a lot of information so it can give you some really great insights. What sort of things do you try to get from a potential sales candidate so that the AI can start to decide, you're going to be a good match for a company? What do you ask?
That's a great question. One of the things that we try to understand is, what are all the data elements, as you mentioned, that are going to be used as features in any matching algorithm. Our Hired started off primarily in the tech vertical, so we have a lot of our training and a lot of our data focused on the technology side. Sales is actually a newer vertical for us, so it's actually really timely because we're going through these exact conversations right now, actually, as we build out these features around what is important to a sales executive and a sales team. How are you going to know if they're going to be successful? A lot of the things that are unique about our platform are transparency on both sides. So one of the first sort of level setting ways we can understand if a match is going to be relevant is around the salary expectations. So we require our clients to provide upfront, specifically in sales. We'll talk about what is the base versus OTE that this role offers, and the same goes on the candidate side, so that we're not really from the get-go providing a mismatch. Also things like industry. So was the salesperson selling, they had experience selling into HR tech or IT? Like who are the buyer personas that a salesperson has worked with? What kind of quota attainment they've had historically? Have they serviced SMBs versus enterprise? There's different sales cycles typically that someone would have in that scenario, and also sales cycles of different products are different as well. Is this a SaaS product? Is it a more traditional product? Is it a data product? So we try to, like I said, collect all this information about candidates, specifically to do with the function that they're going to be working on. If it's an AE versus an SDR, let's say, or BDR, there's going to be different pieces of information that are going to be important. And once we have all that baseline data, we can really start enabling the matching and filtering on the employer side, because the way Hired works essentially is that we're almost like a reverse job board. So companies actually apply to candidates. And so there's a lot of benefits of why that actually makes sense for both parties. But then actually companies can start to filter by the attributes that are important to them. And as they start sending out interview requests to candidates, we start learning about what are the type of candidates that are going to respond positively to a reach out to a company. What are the types of candidates that a company is reaching out for this specific role, so that the next time they come into the product, they're starting to see recommendations that are improving based on the information that we know about both sides.
Oh, that's great. And as I just finish up this line of questioning before I hand off to Tessa, one thing that we teach at Harvard is we like to get into the positive psychology end of it. And there's a lot of research behind, if you assess people for optimism, that's actually predictive of sales, because it predicts what's going to happen inside someone's head, that inner voice of, am I going to be discouraged when Josh says, no, I'm not interested? Or am I going to say, hey, Josh, thank you for saving my time. I'm going to be off to the next lead. So we found that optimism is actually elastic. The more optimistic a person is, the more persistent they can be and can have some higher sales. And the reason I mention is that part of this podcast is sharing information. So if that helps your AI, your hungry AI data.
That's great. I personally believe in that too. I think optimism is something, sales or really for any type of role. I've found people that have an optimistic viewpoint are going to be, obviously it has to be based on some kind of some form of reality. But I think there's a lot of benefits of bringing in people that are generally optimistic, positive attitudes. Specifically for sales, I can see how that makes a lot of sense. One of the things that it's actually brought up an interesting idea, or in my mind, was we do a lot of, on the platform, skills-based assessments. So everything that we do at Hired is we try to focus on hiring based on skill, not based on opinion. And we've gotten really good at that on the technology side, where it's very, I would say, straightforward to give an assessment on 5 questions on the specific coding language that someone, do they know this or do they not know that? One of the things that we're actually thinking about and talking about now, we don't have a feature or product for this yet, is how do we actually test salespeople in that same way, where we do a skills-based assessment beyond just what they're, the data that they're providing, right? Because people can provide a base level of information about themselves and their history, but then there's also this next level of vetting that we like to do, which is around people can kind of get badges and make themselves stand out in one way or another. And one of the things is around sales that we're still actually discovering and figuring out what is important there.
Hey, Josh, with the badges, do you ever use Credly? Have you heard of these guys?
I'm not familiar with it. We actually have our own. We have our own platform. Hired actually acquired a company a couple of years ago that does technical assessments, and it fully integrated it into our marketplace. So it's all proprietary testing that we do currently on the platform.
Yeah. Because the reason I ask, I think on Thursday or Friday, I spoke to John Finkelstein, who what they do is kind of not exactly like yours, but they'll have badges, if you take certain courses and certain accreditations. So then when you interview, kind of sort of similar to what you're talking about, rather than being, and we've all seen this, and I've seen this executive recruiter, is that you can have this charismatic, charming person, smooth talker. They'll get the interview, they'll get the job before someone who has all the right experiences. And then that person just flames out, and the person who could really do the job didn't get it. But you match up the credentials through AI the same way you're doing it. So I wonder if this is kind of the next trend. But I didn't know, Tess, you got a question, so I don't want to, after that.
I was going to say, it's just one quick point, is that it's super interesting, right? You think about, it's historically, companies would look at like badges like, I went to Harvard, right? And that would be a badge that someone would have that would sort of give this validity to a person's education. This is kind of flipping it in a slightly different direction, where it's, there's been some challenges with that over time though, where people have this bias towards, really strong educations, or they have a certain, they went to a school and they, love the Badgers, right? Like, where I went to Wisconsin, right? They have these biases towards specific schools or not schools. So this is a slight evolution of that, to say, hey, this is a badge based on this person's skills, that they've actually proven that they have these skills, right? So it's kind of that next level of kind of saying, oh yeah, I have this, I went to this great education. I got, you make the assumption that the person is very smart based on that. This is actually sort of a proof point around that.
So, Josh, one of the kind of major themes that have come up in the conversations that we've had on the podcast is around the link between culture of an organization and whether or not it's a positive place to work. And when you have talked a lot about the assessment of skills for the candidates, but how do you measure whether or not a candidate might be a good culture fit for an employee organization? Is there some level of assessment, or do they share a certain amount of data around the type of organization they want to work for, or from the employer's perspective, is this candidate a good culture fit?
Yeah, it's a great question. We talk a little bit about culture fit versus culture add too, where there's sometimes it's good for, especially in diversity and inclusion, to not only have people that squarely fit within the culture that you've defined, but also can be additive to it. Obviously, you don't want people that are going to be detrimental to the culture, but there are certain situations where you may have a gap or a known gap in your culture, in a specific skill set or value that you have, that you actually are going out and looking for proactively to sort of bring diversity or bring a fair mix. We don't do any sort of non-skill based assessments. We've discussed those things, and I think there's a lot of validity to doing those type of personality tests and things like that to see fit. One of the things we do focus on is we have what we call the wish list. So as I said in the beginning, what we try to do is collect as much information as we can from both sides. And one of those things that we collect on the candidate side is what it is that you're looking for in your next role. So we ask things like company size, industry, remote preferences, a slew of different things that we can actually, data points that we can actually use to match. And the employers, we're gonna do our best job of matching those to what we know about that company. And then the companies can actually also further refine and look, I want to only look at candidates that are interested in working at companies between 1 and 500 employees, or whatever that sort of criteria is. But I think what we're doing is making that initial match kind of like a dating site, and a lot of times those cultural conversations about culture fit or culture add tend to come out a little bit later in the process. So we're not necessarily always involved in that, but I can definitely talk a lot about what we're doing as a company to make sure that we're hiring people within our values, and that's something we make as part of our interview process, is values assessment on candidates, and come up with specific questions that sort of try to poke into experiences that they've had, beliefs that they have surrounding our values as hired.
So just a quick add-on question to that then, because we spoke right before the podcast started for a moment about how the AI-driven hiring system allows for maybe an elimination of systemic bias that may occur when it's a human-focused assessment system. So how when you have those situations where you have organizations that are looking to hire for diversity or looking for cultural adds, because they've realized they have a real gap in the number of women that work at the organization, or in leadership, or and so forth, or with racial and ethnic minorities, how does Hired really address those questions around being able to hire for diversity?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something that has been top of mind for every one of our customers, which is really exciting to us. Is how do we help companies find more underrepresented talent build a more diverse team and workforce. We started looking at, Hired has always been known as being a thought leader in diversity and inclusion. For the past 10 years, since the company has started, we've over time created a number of features within the platform to help companies solve for diversity in different ways. We have salary reduction bias, which come a little bit later in the process, where we find if a company is sending a interview request with a salary that's underneath or way above someone for the same exact role, that may be an underrepresented candidate, we will actually flag it to them. They can still decide that they want to go through with it, but we'll actually let them know, hey, this salary seems to be biased, that you're proposing here.
That's actually, so you just jump right in, right? And you'll say, wait a minute, this is not fair.
Yeah, we'll,
maybe a flag.
We're not gonna stop them from doing it flat out, but we're gonna raise the awareness so that a lot of times these biases, as I know you guys know, is unconscious bias, right?
Yeah.
So they're not necessarily things that people are thinking about at the time, but we're flagging it so that we can bring that awareness to them. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to just quickly ask, what percentage of people that you flag and you go to them and say, hey, we got a flag up here, what percentage change the offer or listen to your advice?
A lot. Yeah, I don't have the raw data, but it's significant. The people change it at the time. It's a significant amount of people that actually take that recommendation from us, which is exciting for us, because we can actually help shape sort of the get ahead of it, right, and change it.
Do you ever look at the other side? So women have a tendency to underestimate their worth, and
right.
And also women have a tendency to feel like they have to have done the job before they go for the job, whereas men will go up for the next job knowing they have the potential to get it to do it. Do you see those types of trends in your data, and will you ever flag the other way to say you're underestimating your value or your worth for this particular role?
Yeah, exactly. So we actually put out, one of the things that we're really proud of is all the data reports that we put out every year. We have a report that we publish, which is the salary inequality report, that talks specifically about the point you're making, where on average, women are asked for less money, and so they end up getting less money. That's sort of historically what's happened. And so one of the things that we do actually when candidates are actually going through the registration is we provide them with visibility into the salary ranges for their experience and for everything we know about them as they fill out their profile. We provide them with a full bell curve so that they can actually see, and it's all real-time data that we have.
So you see, they could see it. So as like if Tessa's apply, she'll see the real-time data of what.
She'll see this is for your role, for your level of experience, for the skills that you've told us about, for the the assessments that you've taken, and this is it won't be so precise, but we'll give you the bell curve, and then you can actually put in, the candidate can put in what their expectation is, and so we try to provide, like, our Hired's vision is to make all hiring equitable, transparent, and efficient, right? So you think about kind of those principles that we operate by. This specifically is talking to the all three of them really, but the equity and transparency. So we have all this unique data. I would argue that we have probably the best real-time salary benchmarking data, because we're seeing offers happen back and forth in real time, so that we actually provide that on to both sides in ways that make sense as they're going through the process. And that's just one of the things that we've done from a diversity and inclusion perspective. The other thing is we have a bias reduction feature. So a lot of times, we talked a little bit about this earlier, but a lot of times people have these unconscious bias, whether it be by a name, by a photo, by the school people went to, what year they graduated. And so we have a filter that you can actually switch a toggle and turn off all of that information. So a lot of people like to see it because it makes it a lot more of an interesting, process to when you see people's names and faces and kind of where they're from. And but we also give that option for people to actually force that off as well, which is a great feature too.
So Josh, so just to frame it, make sure I understand, so let's say I'm posting and I'm looking for a kind of tech job. They may not have my name, my, where I went to school, anything that. They're just judging me purely on my skills, my talent, and my criteria, and that's it.
That's on the employer side, yeah. So the companies they have the option, so they can either decide that they can do it either on an individual level, or the company can actually decide for all the recruiters there. Do you want to use the product in a way that shows the faces and the names, or do you want it to be completely focused on only the experiences and the skills? And again, a lot of people take that opportunity to do this in a bias-free way. And the last thing, which is the most recent thing that we've done, which has been hugely popular, and we've been seeing over the past, we launched this new feature, what we call diversity goals. Diversity goals is something that every company has some form of goals when they're looking to bring diversity and to their team and bring in more underrepresented talent. And so there's been a lot of solutions, a lot of products that have come out to try to help companies with this. And what we found is that a lot of the tools and the products that are out there are actually doing things in a way that we don't feel so good about. There's a lot of companies that are using AI and using inferred data to actually classify people. So they may look at the photos, they look at the names, they look at the schools that people went to, and they will make an assumption about what gender, what race this particular person is, and then serve that all up in a tool. And what we found is that that we don't feel like that's the right approach. So what we've done is we've actually like we do with all the other pieces of our platform, is we've actually asked people, candidates, to self-identify with what gender, what ethnicity they are, and several other attributes. And what we do on the employer side is we have a single checkbox, a single sort of filter, if you will, that if a company is looking to bring in underrepresented talent, we will push those people that match the skill set to the top of the list. We don't disclose any of the specific details of the information of how this person identifies in terms of what underrepresented group they may identify with, but we give companies the opportunity to see all those people at the top of the list. We also don't exclude anyone at the bottom. So it's still the same list, but just reordered essentially to make sure that the underrepresented talent is coming to the top of the list. And we base all of our underrepresentation based on the EEOC definition of underrepresented talent in tech, which is our what we're talking about here. And so historically, before we had this feature, on average, companies would have about 20% of their pipelines for a specific role filled with underrepresented talent. 80% would be non-underrepresented talent. Now, once people are using this feature, what we're seeing is over 50% of their full pipeline for a specific role having underrepresented talent, 50% of them being underrepresented, which is really a huge shift and a huge, we're really proud of that, because we're seeing now big trends in companies actually being able to bring in more underrepresented talent into their pipelines. And it doesn't mean that they're going to use any of that information in making the hiring decision, but they're going to at least get that filler, like a more full pipeline of a more sort of diverse group. And we also partner, obviously, in order to have these underrepresented talent pool to showcase. We partner with hundreds of organizations where we actually have relationships with them directly, so that they actually send us any underrepresented talent that they may have for their specific community. So sometimes companies have spent a lot of time, invested a lot of money in building up all these one-off relationships with these different communities. What happens is they can't possibly have that sort of level of investment across hundreds of the communities. So we actually do that work and do it at scale for not only just one company, but all of the companies that work with us.
On that note, do you do anything with age? We have an ageism issue. Like in Eastern cultures, they really love older people for their judgment and wisdom. In our Western culture, you're too old, we're not going to think about you. Is there any trends that people are looking for older people, or is older people like an underrepresented community? Does age play any role from your viewpoint?
It's a great question, and definitely age is ageism is one of the things that falls into things that we try to get people to avoid. I don't believe that we actually include that in our underrepresented group, simply because we follow the EEOC standard definition, and it's not included in their definition. But it's something we've talked about, and there's other aspects of demographics that we've also looked at before. But I think we do have, I'm pretty sure if you do that bias reduction toggle, that we do remove the year of graduation, which is sometimes something that people unconsciously look at to weed out people that are older than what they're looking for, or something like that. And it's also the last thing I would say is we do this wage gap report that I mentioned before, that where we talked about that females tend to ask for lower salaries. In that report, we also talk about age and the wage gap with age as a sort of filter as well.
Yeah, one of my thoughts on it, and I'm curious if you have any thoughts in this direction, is that I know a lot of people who are older, and they're very happy to take a much lower salary in exchange for like healthcare benefits and insurance. And I'm wondering if that's some sort of opportunity that some of your clients would want to have. Like, sure, we're happy to pay full boat on insurance if you're willing to take a half cut or something like that.
I mean, our view on that would be, let's base it on skills, right? We don't want to really give people the opportunity to kind of start cherry picking, if you will. That's why we actually don't even. Some platforms let people look by filter by ethnicity and really get really granular with things. We try to keep it more high level and focus in on the skills, give people a little bit more of a blunt instrument to say, I'm looking for more underrepresented talent. Let's show you underrepresented talent in tech, but we don't want to really enable cherry picking, because we think that actually does a disservice to the goals of actually building a diverse team, because we think that actually leads to more bias and less diversity.
Tessa?
Yeah. So one question I have, because this has come up a few times also in the podcast, is that where there's an obvious labor shortage in some industries and sectors of the job market, and we've heard different theories around the Great Resignation versus the Great Reshuffling. What's your take on it, or what's Hired's take on it? What's happening? I
mean, we've seen a huge sort of shift in power, I would say, towards the employee side. Our view is that candidates or employees have really taken the time during the pandemic to think about what it is that they care about in where they work. People have wanted companies to take a stance on social and justice issues and cultural issues like they've never had historically, and people want to believe in the values and believe in the mission and the vision very, very deeply in where they work. And I think that has specifically in tech, in sales that I'm talking about here, we've seen that become more and more important, and sometimes people are willing to take lower salaries even to work at a place that they feel connected to the mission and the vision. And we think that a lot of that has led to people taking the time to think about, hey, this is this is aligned with what I believe in. This company's mission and vision is aligned with what I believe in, and I want to, or it's not, and I want to leave and go find a place that does. And so that's sort of that whole idea of this wish list that we created was, what are the things that you're actually looking for in a company, and is it a hard no? Like, should we not even send you interview requests to companies that don't match this, or it's just something that you care about, but you wouldn't turn down an opportunity because of. But we've seen a lot of people moving at much greater rate now. I'd say some of it has to do with just the market and the people see other people leaving, and then they say, maybe I can get a better rate or be part of a culture that resonates with me, and then it starts a little bit of a snowball effect. But all of our customers are dealing with that too on the flip side of, how do I really engage my teams, engage my and connect with them, especially with this remote, in this remote world. It's harder and harder to connect with people in general and build relationships, and it's hard, but it's also the most important thing a company can do right now to keep people excited and keep people motivated and keep people aligned. And so it's something that we are spending a lot of time on our internal teams investing in, because it's really important for us to be able to build and retain the incredible people that we have, but also our customers come to us and ask us about it, right? So it's something like diversity and inclusion, where you can't just sell a product for it, you have to live it. And it's something that we take internally too very seriously, is we walk the talk, we talk the talk, and we walk the walk. And that's how we're able to actually provide the expertise and provide the thought leadership around it.
So Josh, this is all great. I think I can speak for Jack and Tessa that when we talk to all these CEOs, we want to stay on all day. But as we come to a close, I'm going to ask you my crystal ball question. So imagine you have a crystal ball. You can predict a few years into the future. When all this is settled out, there's just so much change in the workplace. Which trends and changes do you think are actually going to stick for the good? What do you think might come out of this for the good?
I think what we just talked about, where I think employees are going to be wanting to work at companies where they can connect and they buy into the vision. I don't think that's going away. I think that's something that is here to stay, and I think companies are going to have to invest a lot more and work a lot harder to figure out what they stand for and make that more prominent in how they communicate internally and externally. I think remote is something we didn't talk a lot about today, but I think remote is sticking. One of the things that I would tell
you guys are a
people is,
remote first company, aren't you?
we're a remote first company, where one of our big strategies next year is becoming a best in class remote first strategy internally. Again, it's the same kind of thing where we need to sort of eat our own dog food because people are asking us about it. And so we're investing a lot in asynchronous communication, better ways to get alignment across. Everyone in the company knows what we're all doing and what their role is in that. It's surprisingly a lot harder in a remote world, but it's really important. And with
Are you guys in the metaverse yet, though? Are you guys avatars meeting in the metaverse yet?
We are not, but I do. I have a Oculus sitting right over here that I am playing with to see kind of if it's something that we should kind of explore or try. But it's not something we
were just talking about this right before we went on, because I interviewed a guy who has a startup company that they're building all the tools for the metaverse. So I went over to their offices, put on the Oculus glasses, doing it. So they were thinking, maybe if we could do the podcast like that, that would be really interesting, right? That would be unique.
I'm down to try, because I'm looking for other people. I'm looking for other people to test it with, because it's still a little bit sparse right now.
It's wild. So I'll take you up on it, man, because it's. I got to say it because I brought my son with me, and he was much easier to kind of get right into the swing of things. For me, it took a little bit longer because I'm a little bit older, I guess, maybe perhaps. But I got to tell you, I was sold. Like, I walked away thinking, why would, especially let's say a remote first, like you're doing, why wouldn't you have people just have the meetings in the metaverse? You're kind of, you're it's a little bit more dynamic than the format we have now. And it brings people together. I could just see so much potential.
Yeah, it's still early days for me on that piece, but I love seeing people's faces and interacting with them. I think obviously with the remote world, you're able to actually do that in a way that we're all in different cities and we can all be sort of in the same room together. And I think that's really incredible. But I think one of the other things with remote that is not going away is once you have one remote person, even if you start going back to the office, the company has to operate in a remote way. And now that companies have hired remote people during the last 2 years, I think the genie, I kind of say the genie's out of the bottle. It's going to be really hard, even if companies really want to kind of go back to this office culture, to not operate in a way that it actually is inclusive of people that are in remote locations. Once you have remote locations, it opens up sort of incredible opportunity to go after the best talent and find people wherever they are, the best people and the best fit for your company, whether that be in the country that you're operating in or globally. And so this is a big trend that we're seeing now, is companies are, especially with the pressure on pay equity and sort of the incredible demand that's happening right now for tech talent, is companies are starting to open up even broader views of where they're going to be looking for top talent. And a lot of other countries outside of the US and outside of kind of the core European countries have been investing in STEM education for tech talent, so that it's kind of this perfect storm where there's a lot of great tech talent that never had the access to opportunities, and used to be where talent is I would say that talent is universal. Opportunities never were before. They were very segmented or specific to a city. Now the opportunities can all be can all be available to the best talent, no matter where they are, which I think is really exciting.
One last quick question, Josh, before we head out. I think everybody wants to know, what kind of salaries can you expect? I know they're all different types, but you hear about tech and all the money is being made. I mean, generally speaking, like if someone wants to pivot, let's say someone who's watching this who wants to pivot into tech industry, somebody who wants to reinvent themselves and go back to school, is it possible? Number one, and number two, what's the real deal? So
great question. I don't want to give you a specific answer because it's very, very different based on level of experience and the specific function in tech. It's very hard to say just this is what you make in tech. The good news though is that, like I said, we have all this data and we publish it publicly available to everyone. So, and we have this really, really nice tool on our website, hired.com/salary, where you could go in and put in any kind of filters you want for remote or specific geography or specific skills, how many years of experience, and you can actually see the very granular data that's in real time happening in our marketplace. So I would encourage people, if they do want to, if they are looking to explore that, if they're thinking about, should I get into data science or machine learning or XYZ, you can, and you're interested in salaries and an important aspect of what you're looking for, I would go there even before you kind of start getting into some of the investing in classes and schools and things like that. But the other thing I would say to that point is we've seen a big increase in non-traditional educations, specifically in tech. So people who are maybe later in life, or maybe they want to do a career pivot. There's coding boot camps are obviously a big trend. One of Adecco's one of our sister brands is called General Assembly, which is a coding boot camp, but there's obviously a lot of other ones as well. And a lot of people are also being self-taught. So they're going on YouTube, learning how to code. And again, it's all, we try to strive for that skill-based assessment. So if they come in and they could prove themselves in our coding assessments, then there's no reason that a company should not hire them and we're seeing companies hiring those people just as equally as they are people that have traditional, really strong traditional educations and things like that as well. Which is
Josh, don't
That's
tell
great.
that to a mom who's about to send her 18-year-old to college paying a hefty tuition.
Well, thank you, Josh. This was great. This is, it's really interesting because it's so different the way you do business compared to kind of the typical job board. I mean, you really took it to the next level. And I love what you're doing about diversity. So it's fantastic. So I'm so glad you took the time to share with us all the great things you're doing over there. If you don't mind, maybe we could do is when we post it, Mike, Tessa, what do you think? Is that, Josh, if you're okay with it, maybe we could add on, the salary, when you, because I think I've reported on that too, kind of the salary ranges and all that, because people want to see that and then how they can get into it because that's such a hot area and the interest of so many people.
Yeah, it would be great. We have our, we put out that report. I think we talked
Yeah.
about it, Jack, previously.
Yeah.
The set tech salaries report.
Yeah,
We publish it every year. It's also great that we do it every year because you can see how things change year over year. And then we have we'll also send you the link to the salary calculator that I talked
That'd be
about
great.
as well. So you can put that in the show notes because
Awesome.
that's helping a lot of people kind of figure out what they're worth, right? Which is really important.
Perfect. Excellent. All right. Well, great. Well, thank you so much.